And then when I came there, I'm pretty sure that Elizabeth was at the door. Elizabeth greeted me, and I think the next person I met was Nadine Tolstoy. It was certainly, the sequence may not be correct, but I did meet Nadine soon after that. And my conversation with Nadine was most intimate after I had heard Norina speak. Norina had, as I tried to explain, I think previously, been given the order by Baba to reach out and spread his message of love and truth. When I entered into this home that was shared by Elizabeth, Nadine, and Norina, I was very happy in the ambience of the whole place. And I first spoke to Nadine after the talk. That's my memory of it. I spoke to Nadine after the talk, and she was very maternal about it all. Because I think I explained previously that I had been very devoted to Jesus Christ. And I told Nadine that my impression is that in Norina's talk, she had presented Baba virtually as the Christ. And it was hard for me to reconcile those two. And Nadine responded, "Don't worry about it. Baba will do that for you." And I certainly was encouraged to return, which I did many times. Now, about this phenomena called spiritual thought transmission, I feel the best explanation of it was made by Adi. It certainly was unique, and it deserves some kind of explanation by one who knew the relationship between Norina and Baba as his servant in the use of this spiritual thought transmission. It is genuine spiritual wisdom to help the different types of seekers to know and understand what is the truth in varied thought form. It would be inspiration to all who would think freely. It is pure selfless service in perfect realizing reaction within and without. The pure thought to help in vibratory experience in the human being is not to be understood intellectually, but it is to be seen, knowingly felt. When a thought is transmitted to a person, the efficacy and value of the reception of such transmission depends upon the spiritual status of the source of this transmission. But even at its best, it can only stimulate and guide the recipient. However, when as a result of the greater spiritual preparation of the disciple, the Master's descending grace directly uses the mind of the disciple for the transmission of the truth through thought order, the disciple is not only himself lifted up to a higher consciousness of closer unity with the Master, but he becomes a creative force which inspires and guides numberless persons who are merely seeking the truth through the intellect. And what I have just read was written in 1948 by Adi. Having been there, it's very important that those of us that were benefited by Norina's work get their seal of this confidence, this seal of sincerity and devotion that Norina certainly showed. And I felt this, what he calls the power of the Master's messages coming through her. They certainly influenced the lives of many people. There was a change in the quality of the personality. It was my memory that, for the most part, her eyes were either closed or partly closed, just from the simple observation of someone unfamiliar with thought transmission. The description would be that she seemed to be in a trance. It was a change. There were changes in the voice. There was a change in the appearance. There was just this entire environment was charged with something which I have stated just prevent negative thinking. It was Baba's love, really. Love of a higher order in any case. I mean, one can't say it was exactly Baba's love because that only he can radiate. But there was a definite higher degree of consciousness or purification that one sensed.
I was going to say that now, after this talk, how long was it before you were invited to come and live with all the ladies at?
Well, I think, as I say, it was during the Christmas of 1943 when I attended the earliest talks, as I recall, and in just exactly when we were invited was, I think, sometimes early in 1944, probably sometime in January of 44, approximately. I had been attending pretty regularly both the talks at the private home of Elizabeth, Norina, Nadine, and also the public talks at the Little Carnegie Chamber Music Hall. And at those public talks, Phyllis and I were asked to be usherettes and, just welcome people and do little chores, which, of course, we felt honored to do. But, I mean, we were never anything but very aware that we were becoming interested in Baba. I think I'd like to give Phyllis and myself credit in that respect, that there was nothing glamorous about either Elizabeth, Nadine, or Norina at this point in their lives. We knew they were totally devoted to this master, and that's what interested us as well. I mean, it would be easy to, for some superficial observation, to say, well, you must have been attracted to these glamorous women. they were not glamorous at that time at all. They had, Norina had given up all of her essential wealth to Baba for his work in India, and for this, well, essentially for his work in India, and the same with Nadine. Mm-hmm. And they both were under the care, essentially, of Elizabeth, who was given an order from Baba. The order came from Baba to support Elizabeth, to support Norina and Nadine.
Was Kitty living there?
No.
Not yet.
Kitty came for the first time in 1952. Mm-hmm. And as I say, we were invited to live with them in 1944. Right. It just happened that at one meeting in the home, Norina asked Phyllis and myself to stay after the meeting. And she had indicated at earlier meetings on and off that Baba was drawing and interested in a couple of people there. Mm-hmm. And it was just never occurred to us that we were the couple of people.
Yeah.
But when she did ask, it was not an immediate decision on our part, because each of us had involved home situations, but it was part of Baba's compassion to get me out of my home situation. I won't talk about Phyllis's, but I never had any regrets about it.
Right. How old were both of you when you left? In our
20s.
Early 20s, or?
Yes, I was 25.
25.
And Phyllis she was 3 years older, so she was 28.
Mm-hmm. Did it feel like a big move at the time for both of you, or did it feel like just a nice thing to be doing,
mm-hmm.
to be changing location and being?
Well, the location was not vast. I mean, I was living near Columbia University. They lived on East 67th Street, which was about a half-hour drive. Right. But I also was very relieved in many ways, because in my studies at the university, I had reached an impasse, and Baba's writings had just been like the Rosetta Stone. It just gave me all the answers. It really had.
What was your major at that time? Was it in philosophy, or was it so? You must have been
right. Well, I was really
theology, philosophy, or something along that line.
The major was comparative philosophy, basically, and the young man I was going with was also majoring in philosophy, but he had his PhD by that time. He influenced me very much to remain in philosophy, because I realized I could benefit a lot from psychology, and I still can, but but his awareness of the psychology that was taught was true. It was too superficial. Yeah. And had they been maybe giving an in-depth class in Jung and the like, but I had entered into one psychology class where I was very keenly aware that the teacher himself needed a great deal of counseling. And I just switched to what was at least a kind of holiday of reading, because I read St. Augustine and St. Teresa, and I had tremendous reading assignments. I really liked that. I didn't have to trouble about the stupid professors. Well, of course, I shouldn't really delete that, because they weren't It's just that what they were not teaching was the love of wisdom, which is what philosophy is, the love of wisdom. And Harry, my friend, was enrolled across the street at Union Theological Seminary and was a mystically inclined person. And I consider him a very important step in my own spiritual progress, because he was aware of spiritual values. And at that time, my need was to have an answer to the travail of the century at the time, which was the Second World War. So I enrolled at Union Theological Seminary too. It had reciprocal arrangement with Columbia University, and I studied a lot with Reinhold Niebuhr. Phyllis attended that class with me too. I think I told you how I met Phyllis.
That was, she was giving a talk, wasn't it?
We're sort of going backwards a little bit.
But I wasn't sure if you told me all of that, or we talked about it off of the tape.
Yes.
I'm trying to recall.
Oh.
Yeah.
Phyllis was, I would have to go back and explain how I met her prior to our living together with Norina.
Right. I was trying to think. I'm not sure if we covered that or if it was on the tape or off the tape. So I'm going back in my own mind trying to review it. And I'm thinking
whatever. If you
that was an enjoyable
want
part.
to bridge that gap via majoring in philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And my special emphasis was on ethics and values, whereas Phyllis always was very interested in aesthetics too, and so she in that way she interested me as a person, because I did not have those advantages, and I realized that she had so much of a broad vision than I did on the good, the true, and the beautiful. And so those are the basics that really incorporate true philosophy.
Did she impress you at that time as someone with the ability to speak? Because she didn't think of herself as a speaker.
No, Phyllis was not a speaker at that time. She was always very willing to share what she knew with her friends. And it was a period of semi-invalidism during our friendship. When I would visit her home and bring some of my friends from school, and we would have just like a soiree where she would talk to us individually, questions and answers about mostly her psychic and mystical experiences.
What did they think? What did most of your friends think? Were they laughing at it, or were they serious?
No, they were the kind that were, that was something they would just include in the possible ways of realizing of just realizing the truth which they were looking for, basically through many avenues. And not too many people, it is true, have psychic experiences that at the same time filter them through a philosophical mind. And that was interesting about Phyllis, that it wasn't just one that was self-inflating, but she would interpret it philosophically.
Right. A whole different slant.
You give it a different slant.
Yeah, exactly.
Eventually, when we did live with Norina, as Baba's voice, Norina, deliberately sought to have Phyllis not dwell in that realm too much.
Right.
And she did some deliberate work with Phyllis on that score.
And in your own impression, do you feel like that was a helpful thing for Phyllis to go through? Or was it
Well, I
painful?
can't say.
Yeah.
I just take it as part of being already under Baba's umbrella.
Right.
It was part of the necessary
Part of the training.
And part of her karma with Norina.
Norina, exactly. Now, you were probably very closest with
Nadine.
Nadine, and as far as was that fairly right off the bat? You took a close affinity towards her, and it persisted all through that time? Or?
Yes, Nadine was someone I could relate to very easily, knowing that we both had ancestors in Russia. And I'm only a first generation American. My parents both were born in Russia. Nadine came here with her husband, Ilya Tolstoy, one of the sons of Leo, to help produce one of Tolstoy's writings, and the scenario that he was involved with was on the novel Resurrection. Nadine was at that time someone who did talk to people on a very individual, heart-to-heart basis. I don't remember how soon after our earlier meetings, maybe 3, 4, that the symptoms of her chronic illness established itself. It was at that time when she was diagnosed with this chronic illness that Baba, through Norina, asked me if I would want to help in her care. She didn't really require professional care in the strict sense of the word. She just needed someone to be there, prepare her food, help her exercise, be a companion. And it was, as I say, I think it was after we had already moved in that this happened.
Right. And she was the most approachable, it sounds like, of all the ladies, as far as just easiest to get
That's
to be around.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say so, definitely. Yes. Norina, of course, very often was preoccupied with preparing her talks. She gave talks both at home and at the little Carnegie Chamber Music Hall, occasionally at the Steinway Hall, smaller studios there. But I don't think she prepared for them in the ordinary sense. I don't mean that, but she did a great deal of private meditation, and then she had a great many duties that she and Elizabeth were attending to, because it was at that time that Elizabeth had already been given the center by her father.
Right.
And the arrangements were going on constantly. Elizabeth, it's true, was not really that approachable for that very reason. That she was just so much going on.
Who else filtered in at that time? I assume Darwin and Jean Shaw probably were acquaintances that came along at that time.
Right.
And who are some of the other people that we know today that also...
Frank Eaton. Frank Eaton's first wife. I don't remember what her name was. the daughters of Jane and Darwin, who were young, they would come, though, and the son, Lowell, Beatrice, and Renee. Basically, there was Norina had a circle of friends that I don't think that you had met them. They in the early years, a very close friend of hers was Consuela Cedez and Hilda Fuchs, who did live in Hollywood with her husband, voice teacher, well-known voice teacher. Others that really belonged to the Russian emigres from White Russia, the aristocracy. And Norina asked us very often to visit different friends of hers and just provide them with little messages, and that was part of her work, to reach people individually, just like Nadine.
Right.
But Nadine did it. I personally had more to do with Nadine than I did with Norina.
Right. And then after spending, how many years did that go on that you were living with the ladies? Was it?
Well, just about 4 years.
About 4 years. And then were you going down to Myrtle Beach after that?
I think it was more like 3-something.
Well,
they were called back in 1948. Norina, or was it 47? I'd have to look that up.
Right.
47, Norina was called back with Elizabeth.
Right.
And when they returned, she continued to see people. The thought transmission activity was reduced very markedly. But she nevertheless did continue to see many people, and her health improved somewhat for a while, and then it declined again.
Right. Now, since you were there at the time that these ladies both passed, it'd be a lot of just interest on the part of what was the feeling and the atmosphere, and how was that? Was it difficult for all in the house at the time?
Well, actually, I wasn't there when Norina passed. Right. I was there during her illness. Many times I was one of her nurses.
Right.
I was still not a professional nurse, and at one point Norina needed a professional nurse too, but I relieved the professional nurse. And of course, when Nadine died, yes, I was certainly there. Nadine's illness was such that it was just progressively worse until it reached the respiratory center and she couldn't breathe, and so we took her to Roosevelt Hospital, which is also where Gabrielle Pascal died. And she was relieved for a while in an oxygen tent, but it was Norina who said, she has gone. She has ascended. She saw. Before the doctor had even pronounced her gone, Norina had seen that she had really, her subtle body had left the gross body, and then finally there was biological death announced.
Right. And with Norina, where was Norina at the time?
Norina, when she died, she was in Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach.
Right.
Baba hadn't come yet, but they're still working on getting it prepared.
Yes, she had, in 1956, Norina was in Myrtle Beach, and I had been given the little work to take care of her in one of the cabins. Baba was in Myrtle Beach at the time. And he gave me orders. He told me what to do. He told me to give her some certain medication, which really was a placebo, really. But she was she did not die when Baba was there. Was it in 57? I think she actually died. We'll have to look that up.
Now, your connection with the center—that's an interesting point too. Did you go down when Darwin was working, or did you head on down there?
We went there many times, not as much as Darwin. Right. No, they actually lived there for a period of long time. Right. When that was when Norina and Elizabeth were in India. It was Elizabeth's request that they live there and be guardians of the center, custodians. Our trips to Myrtle Beach with Elizabeth and Norina also included Nadine until it was, too much of a journey. But for a while we made the journey with her despite the fact that she wasn't well.
Right.
It was usually in the automobile that we drove down, and we drove down in Elizabeth's automobile. We had one occasion where it was very interesting, as I think I remember telling you this, that Norina sometimes at a holiday season, Christmas or some other time, had us accompany her on talks in the Bowery. And on this one occasion where she spoke to a mission, to a group of people at a mission, she chose a couple of the people that would be invited to come to the center, and it was just some inspiration for Baba's work. And so these two very hobo-like individuals were chosen, and they drove down with us. I don't remember exactly in whose car they went. Maybe Darwin drove them or something. It'd be interesting to ask Darwin about that sometime, if he remembers it. But we drove down with them, and they were very, when they arrived there, needed assistance, needed help, they needed a clothes wash, they needed to be fed, and that was the assignment given to Phyllis and myself for a while. And then one sunny morning, I understand they just vanished. Or they just said they would be leaving. They may have given Elizabeth notice. But it didn't seem like they wanted to remain and
be part of
serve or do anything that would make them useful. But Norina's imagination was, I think, a gift of Baba's, because you can certainly to see readily that she was certainly not a haughty lady, nor was she in any way did she consider herself among the elite, since she did go down to these missions, and some of them we were right in the middle. One place I remember was really just a real honky-tonk place, and she spoke to these people.
What was it like? Was there any humor in her talk, or was it mainly very serious?
No, she had a beautiful voice, for one thing, and it was essentially very serious.
Right.
But I would say that it was light too, and she'd not withhold some barbs. It was challenging. It was very challenging.
Right.
It was nothing like just trying to offer you God in the sweet version of God. Not at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is.
It was not meant to just attract people who expected to have all their wishes granted.
Right. Right.
No.
Yeah, different. And then from the Myrtle Beach, now we're getting close to the time of your first meeting with Baba. And would you like to start in that this evening, or would you like to go more into the personalities of the ladies, or what sounds?
Well,
or do you feel like you'd like to start that as next time? What sounds good?
As I said, if I could just really, just have days on end just focusing on the period of time I did live with them,
right.
I'm sure I would be able to understand that in terms of a whole pattern, the whole pattern of my life, because it, of course, was a very striking and a period of my life, and to have lived with them. But right now I'm just thinking sort of just piecemeal, just one event at a time. I'd like to see it all as one big design, and that takes reflection. It really does.
No, that was quite a long time that you were with them, with all of them. And there are a lot of different events taking place in your own life during that time.
Yeah. Really.
What sort of things were you doing during most of that? I know a lot of it was you were still in college, some of it, but you were working some of the time too.
Yes, that's true. We did. Each of us had part-time work or full-time work. My work always was I tended to want to work with children. I enjoyed it very much, and so I did work with settlement houses or recreational centers, basically.
What was your contact with Baba during that time? And
Now,
would you be able to write him personally, or
yes.
was this?
That's it. It just that was the thrust of their work, was to prepare us to meet Baba. After all, I had no background. I must talk about myself. So this is a separate entity entirely. I had no background to be prepared to meet Baba in terms of any kind of conscious experience to relate this to, except through these three women who were disciples of the Master that now was someone that I was drawn to above all else. And but he was nevertheless someone that I would not really be able to meet unless we had lived with them for a while.
Right, the groundwork had to be done.
Right.
Exactly.
We always had, first of all, the expectation each week almost that Baba would be coming.
Right.
And there were constant disappointments, which was excellent training, as we all know.
Yes.
And
was it always being canceled? His arrival, or
yes.
calling you, or?
Yes, the messages were such that that we were on edge usually. Would Baba be breaking his silence first?
Right.
Would he be coming first? The messages in those years would be very, necessary to line up sequentially in order to give you the right idea of how Baba did enlarge our whole understanding of what he was. Only in perspective can you really recognize and realize what kind of preparation he was giving. I mean, it's a preparation basically which allows you to slowly surrender and not have any fixed ideas or preconceptions of what a master is.
Right.
I mean, you get rid of that notion. And Baba constantly brings you into touch with your true God, with residing in your own heart. And that is, that's why Baba dropped the body, because if we're always depending on what he does externally,
right.
I think it would be
difficult.
A totally different, a different path that we'd be following.
And your parents, how did they relate when you were with the ladies? This must have been, I mean, especially with the up and down of expectations.
The most important thing is, in relation to one's parents, is that Baba has said that you know that really your whole circle of relationship is affected, and that's what makes you so conscious of the need to be true to him, because if he helps you, he's helping everyone connected with you.
Right.
And I'm sure my parents had no background to appreciate him at all. But just imagine the kind of compassion he had, that he did reach me so that in one way or another there were reverberations back and forth.
Did they ever take the chance or the opportunity to see Baba in later years, and or your brothers or anyone else have that opportunity too? Or
they certainly did.
That's good.
Yes, they did. As far as my mother wanted me to return home. I may have told you, and one evening came to our home when Elizabeth had moved from East 67th Street to Gramercy Park to a beautiful house there. After I think Nadine had died, we moved there. It was then that my mother came with a policeman, and I saw her it was on the first floor level, where you could, just see the street level right through the window, and there she was talking to this policeman, pointing, and I guess we heard her too. And he remained passive and never came in. And she came to the door. I think maybe Elizabeth went to the door to see her too, because she came to the door somehow, and then Elizabeth brought her in, and they had a discussion. And at one point, Elizabeth said, "Well, what would you do if she died?" Oh, something of that sort. I think that wasn't the most tactful thing to tell my mother. However, she did go away with some greater understanding.
Right.
And the policeman essentially asked my age, and I was above 21, and on the basis of that, he refused to force himself any further. My father, after the accident, he accepted the invitation to meet Baba, and when he came, Baba was very gracious and invited him to sit down and told him a couple of stories from the Bible. And I was so sorry at that time that we never recorded anything. It was not common to carry tape recorders. It was rather uncommon. But my father did, nevertheless, have that great grace of Baba's audience all to himself. I was there, Audie, and a couple of the men, but that's all he had in. And he told him some stories from the Bible.
Were they ones that you remember or heard?
No, I don't remember. It's too bad. I just don't. I was weeping all the time because my father had been separated from my mother. And I was thinking of her. She was dying of cancer at this time. When Baba saw my father, my mother was sick with cancer back home. And he was separated from her.
Yeah.
And it was, I was weeping so much that I didn't even, and Baba said to my father, she's an angel. And my father later on said, well, he's a very good man. Man, with the emphasis on man. And Phyllis's father came on that day, and it was at the home of Ivy Deuce. And both parents joined us at some meal afterward, Phyllis and myself and my other two fathers. And it was then that my father said he was a very good man. He's too good. That's what he said. He's too good. He's too good. Too good as a human being. Well, of course, at that time, and Phyllis's father acknowledged also just about that. I mean, neither one of them are there to meet the God-man.
Right.
No. But on the other hand, I saw changes in my father's life after that. My father attempted to meditate, which he'd never done previously. Right. He attempted to get up very early in the morning and meditate. It didn't last very long, but at least he made the effort.
Yeah,
he made the effort.
Effect that Baba had.
That was the effect on Baba, and somehow it made him put him more on his alert. I mean, he wasn't so. He was a very active man all his life, but somehow he was aging, but yet it made him. He was a virile, strong man, and he was not ill ever. Just at the very end, but he'd been somehow he never said anything ever against Baba. That I ever heard. My mother questioned everything,
Right.
But she never did anything more than just come down with the policeman. She wasn't really after them, she was just after me.
Security-wise, yes.
Whereas there have been parents, and my brothers, you asked about my brothers, my brothers were always just observers. And one brother who was in Germany as a captain in the medical corps did take, I had sent him Baba's discourses, and he took time to read the discourses to his group he wrote and said, I've enjoyed reading the discourses to this corps of men, and whatever. And he wrote a poem which he never had, and sent it to me. Why can't all men be brothers? And it was on Jesus, and Jesus gave his life for mankind. He'd never written that before. I still have that poem.
That's really fascinating. It affected. Every member of your family has that connection, and it had the effect of Baba's presence, directly or indirectly. And
then in Myrtle Beach, when we were there, a couple of days before Baba took that fatal journey to Prague, Oklahoma, my brothers tried to phone me, and it was just then Baba had asked me, just prior to the announcement that someone was on the phone calling me, that Baba had said, what are you thinking about? And I said, I'm thinking about my brothers, if they will be coming to you too, Baba. Baba said, in time, they'll all come. Then the phone rang, and there was my brother saying, we've been trying to find where you are. Our mother is in the hospital, and they didn't tell me then, but she was inoperable. Cancer had developed to that point, which was fine. I mean, these operations don't always help prolong life, and they're a miserable thing to go through.
But that must have happened, right? So Baba heard about her.
Yes, he did.
And everything was...
Eventually, he sent her... He did. Yeah. See, after... She had this terminal illness, which my brother said I was in need of some, my presence, which I responded to, and with Baba's permission left. It was only about a day or two. It could have been even just a day or two. But I was so keen to see Baba off.
Right.
And he was, of course, as you know, prior to any accidents, this is Baba in his without any kind of deformity to his nose or in any way. Had he been in a serious automobile accident. And I went reluctantly. Of course, everyone leaves Baba reluctantly, but he said, yes, my brother called. Yes. We had just been around in this circle outside the guest house, and Baba has said, what are you thinking? I think he could see us.
Yeah, there's something going on there.
And my brother's trying to call me, The phone there, just interesting. Thought transmission is very interesting on any level.
Yeah, really.
And when I went there, I was not allowed access to her room at all hours. They were very strict. Please leave, at 6 o'clock, here this lady's dying, you don't want restraints when you're with someone you love and with whom some of you feel a little guilty too. One doesn't yet at certain stage really gladly sacrifice for Baba. Like when Norina had me sign a contract, almost an agreement that I should not continue visiting home or have my old friends come, because it kind of interfered with the kind of work they were
trying to establishing.
And I agreed to that. So, nevertheless, at the hospital, I felt a little guilty that I had, much less of a relationship with my mother, because I had been living with the women.
Right.
But on the other hand, as I reflected in perspective, as I explained, you need a perspective on all those things.
Certainly.
It was Baba's compassion to get me out of that kind of a web, because my mother was a very troubled person, and it wasn't my karma to just nursemaid a troubled person. Right. But because it all hadn't been sifted yet, I was carrying a burden of some guilt when I was with her, and they wouldn't let me be with her due to the stringent regulations. And so that night, I got very sick. And my brother had me looked at by his very good associate. My brother was the head of the neurosurgery department in that hospital. But that didn't give me any privilege. In fact, it even was more strict, because he didn't want me to act as if I'm something special. Just the rules are the rules. And his associate, some associate in that field of internal medicine, said, "You have a really severe appendicitis, inflammation of the appendix. You need to have surgery." So I called up Myrtle Beach, and I spoke to Delia, and she said, I said, they want to, this was late at night, they want to do surgery. always been against all surgery, just on principle. And he said, Baba said, do what the doctor wants you to do. And I had the surgery, and what I was permitted, and I had, when I saw my mother with the guilt, had said, oh, Baba, can't I carry some of this pain? She was in a lot of pain. And that's when I got this attack. And that I had to backtrack.
Yeah.
I kept asking Baba, oh, definitely, very strongly. I must have been a big nuisance.
Yeah.
I said, I'd like to somehow make up for it, and may I have some of her pain, do her a favor that way or something. And he surely responded. That was quite an experience. That very night. I mean, look I never had an appendicitis problem before. And then after that, I was able, because I was in the very next bed, and I made a bit of a fuss. I was a bit of a nuisance with those nurses, and so they put me close to her.
Right.
And then, I really tell you the truth, and this is the truth, I was up the next day attending to her.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't see I was a patient. I was a co-patient.
Couldn't say no.
They couldn't say no. I was right there next to her.
It was like a blessing.
Yeah, well, it appeased. It probably got a burden off Baba.
Yeah. Putting all the eggs in one nest.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it was such a shock, eventually, when I was, and so it was decided that I would stay in Ohio. It was in Ohio that I would take care of her. In the meantime, Phyllis was back in New York, preparing the home of, I forget the name of that lady, that she was able to have for a short duration for Baba to stay in, but it was in Hartsdale, New York. Mm-hmm. And in Hartsdale, it was in Hartsdale that Baba came. I did get permission to visit Baba in Hartsdale and leave my mother for that period of time, a certain period of time. And that's where Baba came after the accident, from Myrtle Beach. They drove down.
In there, to Hartsdale.
To Hartsdale. And Baba at that time had asked that we find a young boy, and he gave the description, certainly someone strong enough to help him with his, with the leg that was in
Right, it was all in the set and the cast at that time. But before we get to that point, what was there anything special about Phyllis's parents in relationship when you were living with the ladies? Were they also nervous and upset about this?
Yes, there was. In fact, there was something ongoing, but that I never did really learn too much detail about that. Phyllis's mother, Christine, was not happy about it. Mm-hmm. She really was very critical of Norina. You could easily be critical of Norina because it was a sort of phenomena, this very dramatic type of international beauty, suddenly being a prime disciple of the perfect master. You don't take that seriously.
No.
And Mrs. Frederick didn't. And moreover, she had a very special love for Phyllis. It was her favorite daughter. So there were certain grievances that went on between them both.
Right.
I was not party of, but she definitely, Norina tried to have Phyllis not focus on her former relationship with Hermes, who was a a very dear friend of hers with whom she had, let's put it bluntly, an attachment. And when the attachment was broken, Phyllis always said it was a premature break.
Right.
And it was encouraged by Norina. She wanted it to happen of its own accord. But it happened due to messages that went to her, to this gentleman. And of course, he was never really interested in her in any way other than a friend. It's something that really is very private in nature, and the only thing I can say is that up to the very last, Phyllis felt that it should not have been manipulated, if you like, by Norina, but that it should have happened naturally of its own accord, and that was her opinion.
Right. How did her parents feel about having Phyllis's parents? Were they?
Well, first of all, they didn't live together. Her parents were separated, just as mine were. So independently, Mr. Frederick did not interfere, nor did Mrs. Frederick interfere. But she had her many conversations with Phyllis.
Right.
That's all I know.
Yeah. Now, so this brings us all the way up to the point where you're about to meet Baba for the first time. And would you like to start that in next time? So that gives you a whole lot of time to think and organize.
Yeah, I'm going to, well, that's, I can get much more focused and enthusiastic about that.
Right. Now
because
you really,
after all, that is what it's all about.
Yeah.
The preparation was extremely important.
Right.
It's very interesting to see it in the whole fabric of the way Baba works with people. Like here we were, Phyllis and I were the only real young ones that he had drawn in his net through Norina. And it is remarkable how Norina detected that. Because and she did. She was Baba's thought transmission. You can't deny it. And so that whole pattern, it has to be retraced, and you have to just see where the pattern begins and ends. It began, the pattern began from the standpoint, if you're viewing the pattern from the standpoint of the three ladies, they had, this was the end of 43 was when Baba had, as it were, targeted us. Baba had sent them back in 41, I believe. That's what I'd like to do for next time. Right. In 41, Baba had sent them back.
Right, that's where it started. The line had gone out, and you started to get the pull.
Right.
When do we see Baba now?
41. No, it was 2 years before we heard. 40. Now that's the search that's going on.
Right.
Shortly before we were pulled in, Mr. Chapin had told Elizabeth, "You may have this from my heart." Elizabeth had, when we went down with them in those early years, we remember so well how Elizabeth had to contact, I even knew the names of all those working men, the carpenter and the people that drained the swamps and all those important people.
Right.
She was making all these connections. That's what we witnessed. I was still taking care of Nadine, see. Baba knew he needed someone to still take care of Nadine. He needed Phyllis for something. She wasn't doing much of that. She never did. Her qualities and capacities were not necessarily along those lines. So she was doing, and Bob was doing things which would be very interesting to know. He was just preparing her to do what she's doing, did here in California. But you have to see it from their standpoint. They needed I'm just trying to figure, what did they need me for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where did I fit in?
You see how the pieces all fit together, why Baba had you there.
Well, I can't figure that out quite. I never could. But I did, I can see for my own sake.
Right.
And I'm thinking about them, for their sake. I think I was a thorn in Elizabeth's side 3/4 of the time.
But
Not really.
It must have been a feeling of rather important, though, because out of all the people that the talks went out that were given, there's not more than about 15 people who really seriously came to Baba, and out of the ones that had special time with the intimate ones, you and Phyllis were really the almost targeted as the ones that were at that time.
That's really true. That's really true.
Yeah.
Because, out of those people in the early days that came, as I say, there was some of these emigres, these old aristocrats and old friends of Norina, but they didn't sort of work with them, all the time, and go to Myrtle Beach, do all kinds of little tasks, fill in gaps.
They're on the outside, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, they did Baba's work, undoubtedly, in their own way. But as far as, in relation to Myrtle Beach, and there was not that, there was not that pointedness. They weren't connected with Myrtle Beach. None of those people. They did have. There's some very interesting things that happened. I really wish Phyllis was here to relate them. Phyllis, where are you? But there was this baroness, and there were these aristocrats. They were interesting. There was a baroness and a Mr. Brooks who were very drawn. Oh, such ardency. Mr. Brooks would be someone that Darwin could describe very well, and he liked this woman who was a titled lady. And then something happened, and it just, either they found out that Baba went to the bathroom or something ridiculous, but I think it was when Baba didn't break his silence, because all the time he would say he would, and this, that again is part of the training and the observation. These most ardent people who when you would come, would think, oh, I never could be like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Very devoted and ardent and workers, and they did whatever they did was of value for them, that's to be sure. But they made a back turn as far as Baba goes for the time being. Now maybe they turned around again, never heard of them.
Yeah.
But now Darwin could tell that story because he did have a lot to do with them. It was almost humorous because she was a very strange looking, not attractive at all, but imagine she must have had other charms because they were also very lovey-dovey.